Today's episode of the Nick Taylor Horror Show is brought to you by Diabolic DVD. For almost 20 years, Diabolic DVD has been the source for horror, cult, and weird cinema to customers around the world. Diabolic offers a one-stop shopping experience for all of your favorite labels, including Arrow, Synapse, Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, Mondo Macabro, Blue Underground, 88, and many more from all corners of the globe. So whether you're looking for the definitive version of Suspiria or trying to upgrade your crusty old DVD of Cannibal Holocaust, Diabolic is the owner-operated small business choice you've been craving. Shop online at diabolicdvd.com. That's DIABOLIK DVD.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rue Morgue magazine. Subscribe to Rue Morgue for award-winning insight into the world and culture of horror, from books, movies, and comics to music, collectibles, and classics, featuring the latest film, book, comic book, music, game, toy releases, and more delivered to your door. Guillermo del Toro called it the best damn magazine in the genre. Subscribe to Rue Morgue, the horror magazine of the 21st century, by visiting www.rue-morgue.com. Welcome to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Coralie Fargeat is a French writer and director who made her feature film debut with 2017's Revenge, now streaming on Shudder. Coralie started her career in France as an AD, assistant director. After realizing early on that she wanted to be a director, she directed a short which she took on the festival circuit. The short ended up opening many doors for her, and from there she wrote multiple screenplays and took writing classes, all of which collectively helped her find her voice as a filmmaker. This path led her to pitching the concept for her first film, Revenge, to multiple producers and ultimately striking a deal. In this interview, we hear more details about Coralie's filmmaker origin story, the importance of being an assertive director, and tips for creating your own local filmmaking community and support system. All of this and so much more on today's episode of the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Now, please give it up for Coralie Fargeat. Thank you for being here, first of all. And overall, would love to get a sense of how you made the jump from wanting to make films to getting your first movie made. From what I understand, you didn't go to film school, right?
No, I wanted to go to film school. Basically, I want to be a director since, I'm a teenage. I started, to do homemade movies with the DV cam and making a Star Wars remakes.
Nice.
the animated figures and my friends, in Star Troopers and everything. So, it comes from a long time ago. And when I wanted to do the film school we have in France, in Paris, which is a 3-year film school, but you have to be graduated from university before. So basically, I went to, political sciences in order to after do this school. So when I was in political sciences, I was very unhappy because that's all what I wanted to do. So after that, I decided I didn't want to do any school anymore, even in film. And I needed to, be on the field and be in the stuff. So I started to work as an AD. I started as a trainee and after a second AD. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I started with American feature films that were shooting in France. So for me, I discovered big sets and, knowing nothing, but, being in the middle of what I was dreaming about. So, and that was very useful. And I learned a lot by, witnessing and being a part of a life of a film where you learn nothing, happens
right.
as was supposed to happen. There is always a bad thing that you need to solve, and also learning how a crew is like a little society with, intern fights and, people egos and
right.
Like life. And So that was very, very useful for me. But after a couple of years, I could feel that I had learned what I could learn, on that side, and I needed to try and do my own movies. So I made a first short film, which wasn't that much in the genre, because in France, at the time, it was almost impossible to do genre films, horror films, like it didn't exist at all. So I knew I needed to be smart and find an idea I loved, that I could direct in a way that I could do what I love and put the direction that I love, but choosing something that first wouldn't cost a lot of money, so it could be finance, and secondly, that's something that also the industry would accept at the time, because you have to put a step, in the door. And so that was my first short film, and it was great. It was very well received, and I did many festivals at the time, and so basically it opened many doors. But at that time, what I hadn't realized is that I didn't know yet what I was going to do next. So I didn't have, a feature project. It was just the beginning. So, I found myself like having all those doors opened, and, and I didn't know how to go and where to go and with what to go. So basically it took me a bit of time to figure out what it was I really wanted to make in feature films. So during that time, I, did many different jobs, nothing, just to earn my living and writing on the side. And also, going to a year class in writing, which helped a lot as well. And basically writing many projects that maybe didn't, got to the end, but helped me really finding what it is I like and what I want to do. So finally, I knew that I wanted to basically make the movies I loved to watch when I was, a teenager and a young adult, and that created my love for cinema. And in France, it's very difficult to make those kind of films, because the industry is more focused on, more social drama, more intimate films. So I knew it was going to be difficult. So I knew if I was going to write a genre film, an action or horror films, I needed to have done something before that would help people see, okay, she can do that. They have something, because a first film, your first time director, nobody, trusts you like that. So I decided I needed to make a second short film that would be closer in the themes and in the look and in the shape to what I want to make in feature films. So that was my second short, which was a sci-fi movie, an anticipation movie. And it was very different from Revenge, but there are a lot of similarities. Like I created a totally new universe. It's in the future, so it's not it takes you somewhere else. There are special effects and a strong, art direction. And the most important, I knew I shouldn't repeat the same mistake than with my first short. When this second short was going to be done, I needed to be ready for the feature. So as soon as I finished shooting the short film, I started to write ahead. And it was like, really at that time, I put myself under lockdown at my home, like writing, doing only that, being in a kind of a warrior mode, like, okay, it's now or never. It's like you've been writing a lot of projects that didn't succeed, and when you want to be a director, at some point it's a matter of life and death. Like, you want to do that so much that it's how you're going to fulfill, as a person. So there is this moment where it's your moment, you have to take it, and you have to risk everything, to make it happen. So yes, basically I just started and didn't stop from the moment I started to write the first line till the moment the film was ready. I wrote, I went to see every producers. I pushed every doors I could, so the movie would be made in the coming year, because I knew this kind of movie needs the energy, to keep rolling. Like, you can't put the project and wait for 5 years. This
Right.
kind of energy doesn't, you have to preserve it, and you have to. So I was also very involved in finding financing in the way that a lot of people like the script very much. But for a first-time filmmaker, there is a big difference between they love the script, but they're going to put actually their money on the script. And this is a jump that it's not easy to make. And for this, I think you have to show them and convince them that basically you live with your film, and you know where you go, and you have a strong vision that you're that you're ready to defend no matter what. And I think that it took the movie only a year to get financed.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty quick.
Yeah, that is pretty quick. So how did you convey all of these things to your producers? How did you, because I mean, a lot of people are pitching producers very, very frequently, and they get pitches all the time, but how do you communicate to them that you are going to stand by this movie and execute your vision all the way, particularly as a first-time filmmaker?
Yeah, well, basically, I think that from the moment where I signed with my producers, I was lucky enough that I wrote a very detailed treatment. Also, I think that's something that really matters. Like, when you write, when you feel interest from people. Like, I had a first, maybe, 10-page, treatment, like outlining the story and everything. And people, it's interesting. There are great stuff. But I could feel that they were not ready to jump yet. And so I knew I had to work again and basically give them more and develop also more where I wanted to go. So I wrote a longer treatment, which was almost a script. It was maybe 40 pages, like very detailed treatment, where in fact I found the movie. Like, it's, for me, finding the movie is not only finding the story, it's finding what's the soul and the spirit of the movie is going to be. So I knew what the music was going to be, like very hypnotic, electronic sound, and also all the metaphor, thing with the eagle and the non-realistic, action thing that she's kind of a, dead angel rising from her own ashes.
Yeah.
And basically this is what really convinced, like, you knew you had a film. Like, sometime there is a point you have a good idea, or you have many things you want to follow, and there is a point where you find the movie, what's the movie is going to be. And I knew the movie wasn't going to be about survival. It was going to be a totally non-realistic, action, revenge, metaphorical thing. And with that, I gave a lot of material to try and communicate, even if the treatment was very detailed and written in a very literary way, where you could really feel the action, the suspense, the spirit. But I also gathered a lot of images, edited a little trailers based on photos with a super hardcore music, kind of epileptic stuff. And with those things, that's really what made the difference, because people could see they were gonna have something special or different. They couldn't know them at that stage in the movie what totally was gonna be the movie, but
Right.
it gave them the confidence to want to bet on the movie.
And it sounds like it conveyed to them that you had a very strong vision for it. The fact that you submitted such a detailed treatment, and then you sent treatment videos that conveyed the tone of the movie. I feel like a lot of filmmakers, when they're pitching their movies, just don't do that or forget to do that.
Yeah, and also because I knew that the core of my movie was this visual, atmosphere and the way it was going to be directed. One of my reference for the movies is Duel from Spielberg.
Mm-hmm.
Movie with basically a car and a truck, and there is no talking. So that you have to rely on what you're going to create. With a few elements, you're going to create something totally, stressful and with a lot of anxiety and suspense. And also, I think what is very important, it was I was really ready at the time, and that was what I was giving to everybody. And even when I had doubts or, I didn't know, I wouldn't share that. I wanted to go, and that was my only leitmotif. I need to shoot this movie, and I need to go, and I'm ready. And this way you say, okay, the train is leaving. Either you come on board, or I'll have other people come on board. And being as the director, you are the captain, of the train, and you have to show that your train is gonna go no matter what, and find people who want to jump on board with you.
And I've heard from other directors that when they're pitching producers, it's important to convey that the train has left the station. It's important to communicate to them that you're already working on the movie and that it's already in motion, because most producers will jump on board once they realize that the movie is going to happen. So somehow getting the train to leave the station, it's probably the most challenging part, but it sounds like that is the most important part for producers. And then once you get one producer on board, that's when the rest of them start, jumping on board. But how... For those filmmakers who were just sitting there with a script and they're dying to get it moving and they just can't seem to get producers to bite, how were you able to get the train out of the station, so to speak? How were you able to get the project moving and drive that urgency that got producers to jump on board?
Well, basically, I think it's about being realistic to where you are in your career, and what's the smart choice of project for what you want to do. And I knew that for a first feature film made in France, where we don't do genre and we don't do horror, if I wanted to have a chance that this movie was going to be made, I needed two things. I needed first that the story is very simple, there is a line and people can follow the line. And when the line is very simple, they can accept a lot of crazy stuff on the side, but they have something they can, follow very clearly. And the second thing I think that is even more important is that the movie is not expensive. A first feature film has to be cheap. I mean, you will get the freedom, you will get people being able to trust you, because no matter what, they know that, if it's a failure, they're not going to lose a lot of money. And I knew that's what I needed for that film, to be able to be uncompromising, to choose an unknown cast if I wanted, to be able to be very, very gory if I wanted, to be able to, be unconventional if I wanted. And this, you can't have everything right away. So I think when you start, you win so much time when you understand that from the beginning, that the simpler and the cheaper cheapest you start, the fastest you will go. And it took me a few years to understand that, because when you start, I think every filmmakers want to make big movies and
Oh,
be
yeah.
the big directors, and I want to make Star Wars, and and you want to do action and sci-fi, but basically you can write all those movies, but there is no chance that it will end up being your first feature film as a director. So I really think getting into the business is also learning how to how to be strategic in a good way, like the choices that are smart to do to allow you to realize yourself, to get to where you want to go. So so that's also what I had in my mind when I started to write. Like, okay, you're going to do something very simple, 3 people, 4 people in a desert, okay, and that's it. And for the end scene, for instance, which in the end is one of my favorite thing in the movie, when I was writing, I said to myself, okay, I know I won't have money for that film. I can't make everything explode, in the villa. I can't make everything blow up, which I would have loved if I had all the freedom, maybe. So I said, okay, you have to do something very simple and use what you have and very little, and find something that will make it memorable, that people will remember. And basically using this chase in the corridor between 2 people, like hide and seeks with this naked guy, I knew this was with very little elements. I was going to be able to create something very specific, and more important, that was going to be very, very myself, that nobody else would have done, in another film. And so sometimes, and a lot of time, I think when you have limits with your budget, it forces you to be even more creative and go towards ideas you might not have had if you had all the money in the world. And I think this is something you can lose on the way when you start to get more things, and to. So I think it's always keeping a balance. Between the whole freedom and what limits get you in terms of creativity in the end.
That makes a lot of sense. So one of the interesting things that I remember hearing when you did Mick Garris's podcast was after you'd done your short films and you brought them on the festival circuit, you met a number of other filmmakers, and together you seemed to form this collective where you all were sharing each other's scripts, and you were getting very objective feedback, and you were also supporting each other, and helping each other get by. Can you talk about how you were able to build that community? Because I feel like it's so important for aspiring filmmakers.
Oh yes, this basically this, I would say, this has been my film school. In fact, this is the film school we created together, like an auto film school for ourselves. That is not a school, but where we learn from each other. And I think when you're starting as a filmmaker, it's a very lonely industry. Like everybody, is quite competitive. And when you're in festival at the beginning, you look at everybody. Oh, who's gonna get the award? And there is something that pushes you to not being very open to share. And with friends of mine, it was 2 friends at the beginning. We had our short films at some festival, and we decided that in fact the beginning point, we had done successful short films, and we all wanted to do our first feature in the genre, which in France is very difficult. So we all were facing the same problem. And we said to ourselves, okay, so maybe rather than complain about the system that is so bad, the system doesn't want to let us do our movie and the system is bad, maybe we have to think about what we could do differently to be able to make our movies. And and what we decided is that the best way to get the reality of how you make movie and how you can succeed in making movie is by being with people who actually work in the industry. Producer, directors who've directed many movies, script writers who've written a lot of movies, head of departments, financier, people from the distribution world. And we started to gather every 2 weeks at the beginning, and we were inviting somebody from the industry to come and share with us. We were a group of 6 or 7, share with us their experience, how they started in the business, how they're working, what were their experience working with first-time filmmakers, what difficulties they encountered. And this was our reality shot that we got from the industry, making us a little bit, fall from our dreams, like, okay, I want to do this and I want to do that, and think about, okay, so this is how the industry works. So maybe for a first-time film, it's important that it's not too expensive. Maybe for a first-time theater, it's important to work with a producer who also is in a position where he's still hungry and wants to make movies for the same reason, and not a producer who's, producing huge movies and don't really care about, a newcomer. And so all those advice, basically, I learned them there with those, gatherings, and with keeping also this strong contact with the other filmmakers, and meaning that we all go up and down, like we have things we do successfully and we have projects that, never succeed, and we have our really ups and downs. And I think it's really super important to be able to have this faithful community you can share what you go through with. Because it's a tough industry, and there are waves, and I think you need to to make your family, basically. And I think really, and I say it often, that it's I think it's really thanks to this that I managed to overcome, all the difficulties I had to make the right choices and to, go to make it. And that is something that I keep very preciously. We still, meet in Paris, and sometimes a lot of us can't come because we have our projects and our shootings and everything, but we try and stick to it, So I'd recommend everybody to create this strong family around them.
That's great. So you all would meet in like coffee shops or at each other's apartments and talk about your projects and share notes. It's a mastermind is what it is, which is very important. So that's really fantastic. And you're still doing it, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very cool. So one thing I'd love to talk about is the look and style of Revenge is very striking. It's very beautifully done. It feels organic on one end, but it also feels stylized at the same time. So I was wondering how you visually approached the movie, because the aesthetic is very striking and really beautifully done. So where did the original concept for the look of the movie come from? I mean, did you see some either photographs or was there art? How did the look and feel come together, and how did you communicate that to the DP?
In fact, when I was writing the treatment, and it was the version when I told you I found the movie, it came along with fine visually what the movie was going to be. And for me, finding the movie, it's two things. It's of course the story and the soul of the movie, but it's the visual and the music. And so I was listening to a lot of music while writing, and also did a lot of visual researches, photographs, paintings, other movies, to create while I was writing the visual of the film. And so yeah, it was a lot of photographs, also giving intentions, like the movie had to be at the same time, as you say, very organic, very raw, very harsh, but at the same time very sensual and very close to the bodies. So there were many pictures with hyper realistic paintings, with flashy orange juices where you could see the juice and the flesh and all those things that create very strong feelings when you see them. And so after, when we started prep and I started working with my DP, I shared with him all those images, and we talked a lot about the different ambiances I was looking for. And also the Mad Max Fury Road was a very strong inspiration.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, the desert part, because I think the desert thing was so cool, because it was not totally realistic, and that's what I loved, and that's where I wanted to go for the film, not being in a mere reality, but going to the phantasmagory and creating something that is over the top.
Well, how did you achieve that look? Because that desert look that's in Fury Road is amazing, but you can tell that they alter the colors a little bit. So was it a matter of, were there matte paintings in your movie? I mean, how did you achieve that kind of supernatural nature look?
So we didn't have matte painting. We couldn't afford it. I would have loved to, but basically everything happened. Two things: we used filters during the shooting, like to make the skies, bluer and have everything a little bit more contrast and grab the all the natural colors of the desert. But a lot of it was made in the grading? Yeah.
Color grading.
Grading. And the first thing, of course, it was when choosing the location, that was very, very important thing for me, that the desert had to look a certain way. So we did a lot of scouting to find, yes, this kind of stunning environment where you have different colors, and there were a lot of red rocks and natural contrast that helped creating, the mastery of the thing. And after, it was a lot of grading work with all the references, and working a lot on pushing the colors and creating this very, very strong, visual take that we wanted to. So yeah, it was a mix of these three things: the scouting, finding the right locations, using filters and certain kind of optics to enhance what we wanted, and finally the grading that added a lot to the final result. Like I heard they had a year of grading for Mad Max Fury Road. we weren't that rich, but I'm not a there were so many amazing stuff they did that I'm not surprised it needed a year.
And you shot in Morocco, and obviously Morocco provided a really stunning series of nature and landscapes and things like that. But was Morocco also partially, I mean, I would imagine filming in Morocco would be more expensive, but in terms of a low budget production, were there any financial incentives in filming in Morocco?
No, they were not. In fact, we chose Morocco because for us it was the cheapest location where to shoot. We had done scouting in Spain, in Jordania, in Israel, in Morocco, and they all had great locations, but the other countries were super expensive and we couldn't afford for our budgets. So Morocco had also like the major advantage, like we found the villa, and that was the most difficult thing to find, like something that is quite isolated and also with not too far away everything we needed the water, the desert, the cave, and it was difficult to have this gathered, not in the same place, because we basically had 3 or 4 base camps traveling during the shooting. But there were, for instance, amazing desert locations, but we couldn't afford to go because they were too far away, and we would have lost too much time. So it's finding the right balance between what you need and what also you need to preserve in terms of driving energy, losing time for going from one place to another. And Morocco had everything. And also what was very important, that they have amazing crews there. Like they have a lot of shootings, American films, American series. So they are very, very experienced. And when you have to shoot quickly with not a lot of shooting days, you know that you need to be able to rely on your crew. So yeah, that was great.
And shooting in the desert, obviously, those are very harsh conditions. So how were you able to, I would imagine there were moments when it was unbearably hot and it was like filming Texas Chainsaw Massacre, when you hear Tobe Hooper talking a lot about how miserable the entire experience was because of the weather and the elements. Was there any of that in Morocco? And if that was the case, how were you able to lead your crew through that and keep morale high?
Oh, we were miserable too, that's for sure. When you shoot in a desert, I think there is no other way possible. But in fact, what was funny, not so funny, is we didn't suffer from the heat, but from the cold. Because in fact, we shot in February, and in the mountain, there is a freezy wind. Everybody was freezing to death. And the actress was barely naked, like she had a swimming suit. So that was very, very difficult for her, because we had to, spray water on her to fake sweat. And she was so cold that it was very, very hard to, keep her, with enough strength so she could go through the whole movie. And she has been amazing, because physically it has been so difficult, and she never lost confidence. And I think when you have harsh conditions, you need to have a very strong bond with your actors, that that they're going to follow you, and because you're going to ask them a lot. And and the shooting was very intense, because very physical. Everything was complicated. There was no calm days, when you shoot people entering a cafe or walking in a street. Like, we were going from something that was difficult because of the trees, of the blood, or because we were in the middle of the mountain, or because of the cars, or because so that was so great. But at the same time, we had not a second to rest. So we had to go. And sometimes, when the shooting is finished, like, you say, oh my God, how did I manage to survive that? And then you collapse.
Well, one thing you touched on that I think is so critical is you talked about how it's important to have the trust of the cast and crew at the very beginning, so that they'll follow you through these really difficult and harsh environments, knowing that you'll take them there safely, but also knowing that you're building something great together. So how were you as a director able to establish that kind of level of trust with your cast and crew at the beginning?
Well, basically, I didn't. And I think that's something that is very also important to know, that for many reasons, things cannot be ideal either with your cast or with your crews, because in a film set there can be a lot of tensions for different reasons, and sometimes production faces its own difficulties you're not responsible for, but everybody suffers about it. And also, as a first-time filmmaker, nobody trusts you either. Like, you push everybody very hard because you don't have a lot of shooting days, and you want to get the best for your movie. And also you want to do things your ways, which might not be like the classical ways. For instance, as I'm also editing my own movies, I know when I shoot exactly what I need, how I'm going to edit it, so I can, shoot very short stuff here and then. For instance, in the final chase in the corridor, like we had so little time to shoot this that I knew if I wanted to succeed, I needed to do it 100% my way and really tell to everybody, okay, you run from there to there, and after we shoot that direction and we shoot this piece and that piece, and there was a blood, and it was really crazy and a mess because nobody could go into that corridor without slivering, and at some point, like, nobody was knowing what was happening and what I was doing, basically. And this is this moment where you need to stay strong, so as even if people doubt of what it's going to be, you have to keep trusting yourself and know that you do those kind of stuff for a reason. And sometimes you don't have time to explain, and sometimes you don't have time to be nice, and sometimes you have to enter into some kind of conflicts because you need your film to get going and to get what you need. So sometimes that's not nice, but you have not to be nice. And I think that's something that you have to go through. You'd rather not, like, you'd rather that everything, happens nice and smooth, but sometimes it doesn't, and as a director you have to stick to your movie. So for a first time film, you don't control everything because for instance, like, there is a lot of crew you don't know yet. Like, you work with new people, and with some people it's great, and with other people it's not that great, but you can't afford to change somebody just before shooting or during the shooting because you don't have money, you don't have time. And maybe on bigger project, when you have done many movies, it's easier to be able to be sure that you're very well surrounded. But when you begin, you have to handle what you get in the moment you get it. So of course, you do your best, to make everything going the best as you can. But it was related to what I was saying when I started as a trainee or an AD. For having on many shootings, it's not it's not paradise. Like, many things go wrong and many things don't go as you have planned. And I think what makes you strengths is your ability to overcome those difficulties and to handle the things that go wrong and that go not the way you had planned. And after, there are, of course, a lot of satisfactions, a lot of great things that are happening and gives you energy every day. But I think especially for first time feature film, which are very ambitious and with low budget, it is very a hard journey, and I think as much a great experience than something that you have to go through, basically.
Right. And I feel like that's a real balance for a lot of filmmakers, is they don't want to be too much of an asshole, but sometimes you have to be one, when certain things aren't going well and you have to get certain people to rise to the occasion. Sometimes a certain level of aggression is needed, but I think it's that balance, right? Like, you don't want to be an asshole all the time because then people will check out and then they won't work hard for you. But there's certain moments when you need to aggressively lead your crew. And I feel like it's a real balance that a lot of directors are striving for.
Exactly. And I think that the one thing I always have in mind is that you're going to be with the movie in the editing room. And in the editing room, the crew is no longer there, and, nobody care if okay, this is not the way you want it, or you miss this or you miss that, and you are going to present the movie to everybody, and you will have to live with your film for the rest of your life, and you're the only one as a director who handle that responsibility. So of course, I think it's something that you have to keep in mind to be able to be happy when you're in your editing room, to know that you made the movie you wanted to make. And I think it's for a lot of things it's a balance. Like, you have to find the right balance. And I think when you grow in experience, you also learn to surround yourself very well with a crew well, people you love to work with, and people you can communicate easily with. And I think in that way you win a lot of times. And I've read so many testimony of big filmmakers like Fincher or Coppola, that they were so miserable in their first feature film. Like, all the crew, like, it was very hard for them with their crew. And I think it's Coppola, I think, or I don't know, he went to the bathroom and he heard somebody have his crew say, "Oh, he doesn't know what he's doing," and I think you need to be prepared to face this in when things doesn't go the way you would love them to go. Also, when you start, it can be because you're young, because people think you're inexperienced, because maybe sometimes you're a woman. There are a lot of things that can make people see you in a certain way. And after, it's just your work that speak for yourself. And after, for the second and third movie, I think the work has been done. So you can win a lot of time on set.
Yeah, I think it was James Cameron who said, on a film set, every single member of your crew thinks they can make a better movie than you. There's that constant sense of questioning everything the director is doing, and it's something I think a lot of directors have to be prepared for.
Exactly, yeah. And it's challenging in a way, and you have to be able to take what you can take and what is good to take, and leave what you don't need and what you don't have to take. And this, you are the only one who can know that for yourself.
Right. So I know we were talking about the visuals of the film, and I think one of the most striking visual elements of the movie, and I'm sure you've talked about this at length, but the earrings were very, very striking throughout the course of the movie. I interpreted them as being a reminder of her previous self, because obviously she rises like a phoenix from the ashes in the beginning of the movie, and she transcends her previous persona, But to me, those earrings were a big reminder of her kind of tacky past, because they were very tacky earrings, but they were very visually noticeable. Could you talk about how you made that choice?
Yeah, it was going with the symbols I was talking about when writing the treatments, and it was finding those elements, very strong, very simple, and very metaphorical, that would embody that you would remember. So it was the earring for the beginning, it was the phoenix for the tattoo, it was her going from blonde to brunette over the course of the movie. And I knew that those elements were stronger than a lot of speeches, that this speak for themselves. And as you say, the earring are the incarnation of a part of herself that still sticks to herself, even if she's a new person, because it's herself and nobody can destroy that. And even if she transforms, even if she evolves, even if she goes through a lot of things, nobody can take that away from her. And and I think for me, what I love in films, in cinema, that's the simplicity of what images can bring so clearly and so powerfully, that will stay with you. And I think in every movie you love, there is, yes, one or two or three very strong elements that will stay with you and that will keep working, after you've seen the movie.
Yeah. So I'm sure you're tired of talking about the rape revenge genre, but it's a genre that is very synonymous with cruelty and exploitation. And I feel like your movie didn't have any of that, though, if you were to try to classify it in the context of horror subgenres. I suppose you could put it in the rape revenge genre just by virtue of the story alone, but it does not feel like a rape revenge movie. So I'm wondering if you observed the genre at all, because I don't see a trace of any other rape revenge movies in there. But did you watch I Spit on Your Grave or Last House on the Left or any of those movies? How has that genre either affected or not affected revenge?
So in fact, it didn't affected me at all, because basically I didn't want to do a rape and revenge. And it's, when you make a film, it's other people at some point who take the film and say it's this, is that, and this doesn't belong to you anymore. But it's very interesting to see how the film evolves in that process. Because for me, at the beginning, I had watched the Last House on Your Left, but I hadn't watched. I haven't seen, and I still haven't seen I Spit on Your Grave, and I didn't want to see it before I did the movie. And the idea was really, I even didn't know, to be honest, that the rape and revenge was a genre in itself. And I even, I wanted to do a genre film, a revenge film, an action film, using the icon of the girl and how men can see such a girl depending how she presents herself. And for me, it's really the image of the Lolita, that is, for me, fascinating, because it says a lot about how society is organized, dealing with women's sexuality, with how men look at women, and how they can be, everything when they're nice and beautiful and sexy, and when they start to be a problem, okay, they are nothing. We can get rid of them, and that was interesting for me, and that's what I wanted to tell. And when I started to write the script, I was thinking about my story and how, what was going to happen. And I said to myself, well, the worst thing that can happen to her for being this type of girl is being raped. For me, I was seeing it as a symbol of every violence that can, go towards women, that can be violent word, that can be violent, way of seeing or way of considering, and psychological violence. And for me, the rape also was some kind of metaphor of all this violence and the way, society can be very unfair towards those matters. And that's also why I didn't have the need to really film and show the rape, because the rape wasn't the subject of the film. I intendedly wanted to leave it out of frame in a way, to keep it as a symbol, to keep it as a very strong symbol and something that, was a strong part of the movie, but wasn't the core of the movie. And and my references for the movie were more, revenge film like Kill Bill or Rambo or Mad Max, when a character goes through hell and, and goes for revenge and becomes somebody else in the process. I think what you get from the movie is basically my intention from the start. And that after, what I think is kind of beautiful in a way, that's the way an audience or reviews take your movie and analyze it and put it in some genre or another, also finally, make you say something loud that maybe you didn't consciously wanted to say or decided to say, but which is there. And I think, that's why a movie is great, because when you've done it, it's other people who will, analyze and digest and make things come up that you even didn't know, but that were there.
Yeah, because the movie feels like it does not have a specific agenda. It just flows, and it's very much its own. It has its own level of energy, and there's not any overt political messages, but there's a lot to be interpreted. So I'm wondering, what has the response been from the perspective of female empowerment after seeing it?
Well, it has been very amazingly timely. Like when I presented the movie, it was in Toronto, and it was just maybe a month or two before the Weinstein history came out. So it was. Yeah, it was something like a very, when a film and history meet and you didn't plan to, but in a way, of course, that I think I had digested a lot of things that were already there in society, but just not, told. And so I think it became some kind of iconic vehicle where people could jump into to talk about those matters. And but as you say, like, there is also very entertaining, very vehicle and very action that is the own strength of the movie. And so I think the way the movie was received really evolved with how the whole political stuff with the Weinstein stuff evolved. And the more, the speech was, there were the people talking about, violence, sexual assault and everything, the more, the movie became a subject of discussion and was spreading and was interpreted and was, and really benefit of all this to have this like growing power, growing stuff that you even didn't expect. And so that was something very, very strong. And in France, it took a lot longer for this to be able to come. But because in France, we had a lot of difficulty, like facing all those issues. Like we were maybe 2 years late or 3 years late.
Oh,
and
wow.
we're still very late on all those matters, like, equality and gender parity and sexual harassment. We are just starting to address those matters. So the movie benefit a lot from the way it was received in the US, and then it spread in Europe. It was very fascinating to see that, and that's what I like. I think it's the best when you feel that your movie grows in time. Like the movie is living for 3 years, and there are still reviews, and and I think that's why you make movie, that you hope that it's going to stay with people, somehow. And so that was very, very interesting to follow all that.
Yeah, that is interesting. And I was noting that you'd said in the past it was difficult to make a horror movie in France, which is really surprising considering there was that whole time period where you had something like Pascal Langier's Martyrs, and then there was Alexandre Aja's High Tension, and then other movies like Inside. There was a whole French extremism movement. But is that not really the case anymore?
No, well, the French extremism was the American interpretation of the French horror wave. Like in France, those movies are very exceptions, and and it was at a time, it's true, there were those filmmakers, but it was always very strong for those movies to get made, to get financed, and they were still not creating like massive trends in France, but more abroad. Like, yes, like America really embraced those films, and Asia as well. And those are movies that are very international and speak to, that's what I love, like they speak to everybody. But the inner French industry, it's very, it's not the movies that are the most, identified and praised, and they are now, it starts to evolve a little bit, but it's still very difficult to make those kind of films in France. So hopefully we have the rest of the world to
Wow.
to applaud them and to recognize them. Yeah.
Well, France, sounds like French directors need to come to America or go to Asia.
They did. A lot of them.
Are there any up-and-coming French horror filmmakers who you're finding particularly exciting nowadays? Or any recent movies?
Yes, there are some of them who are coming. There were the movie I really liked from Dominique Rocher. It was the Night Ate the World. Like, it was a zombie movie, like in a Parisian building, which was very, very interesting. I think Rowe as well was a very interesting film and filmmaker. In horror, there are a lot of new filmmakers that are coming. Like, there are, I think, three very interesting projects that were in editing when the pandemic arrived. So, but I'm sure that they'll find their way in a bit. But it's still very few. It's still, maybe one every 2 or 3 years, that's managed to really, pop up. So that's France has a very strange relationship with horror in general.
So surprising, because I love those French extremism movies so much, and there's a ruthlessness to them that a lot of other horror filmmakers are just not able to do, or just not doing. I love the ruthlessness of that entire subgenre. So it's so surprising to hear that they're not well embraced in France.
Yeah, it's you're not always a king in your own country, like
right.
a puppet in your own country. But that's what I like. That cinema doesn't have frontiers, so if your movies can travel, and that is great. And sometimes it's also when they are successful abroad that friends start to really like them and to embrace them. That there is a kind of boomerang effect,
Yeah.
Also in the process.
So what are you working on next?
So I'm working on my next feature film. I'm almost done with the writing. I've been really focusing on that for the last couple of years. It's going to be a genre film as well, but very, very different from Revenge. Not at all the same genre or setup, but it's still going to be very excessive in a way, and very, very, very me in the way I like to deal with some kind of violence, even if it's going to be a very different one. But I still try to find, a story that I'm going to be excited to tell visually, and, with the sound and the music, and create something that I'm going to be excited about. So so I hope, like, when the whole pandemic will end, the movie will enter into production, and I should shoot within the next year. So I'm very impatient.
I bet it's exciting. So you're writing the screenplay right now? You're working on the. So what is your writing process like when it comes to screenplays? Do you have a certain minimum amount of words or pages that you try to get to every day, or is it a little bit more intuitive? What is your writing process like?
No, it really depends on what phase I am of the process. I really start with just writing ideas on a paper with a pen, and taking a lot of time to, okay, what is it I want to do? Working around different ideas. And when I start to define a little bit more where I want to go, I start to write very different things at the beginning. It can be ideas, it can be a scene, it can be some characters, it can be a genre, it can be, and so there are a lot of different things. And after I try to construct things a little bit more and draft the first outline or first synopsis, and when I've done that, it shorten your ideas. You have to select the ideas you really want to talk about and the ideas that are not really the project. And so it's really during the treatment phase that I really find the movie, that I'm finding as much as the story as the universe I want to set up in directing. Like, what's the music is going to be, what's the visual is going to be, how I'm going to tell that movie. And this all constructs all together. And the more the process goes, like, the more you focus on the thing that it is really the movie. And a lot of things fall apart, and you put them on the side because they were not really the movie. And I think you find what the movie is by digging, in the writing, and you finally see the rock, and you have to, dig and dig and dig and push the dust and what is not essential to find really the core and what's the heart of the movie. And that's how I like to work, is like being very radical in my choices, and focus on something very strong that is gonna really drive the movie. That is not only the story, that is how the movie is going to be crafted and how it's going to look and sound, and so everything builds all together. For my process.
Right. Well, last question on that note is, how do you know when your screenplay is done? How do you know when you're done?
I think there is a moment, and I think there is a moment that your script is not done. Like, you can like your script and you think there are great parts, and the movie is going to be great, and that the script in the end is going to be great, but you're still not there. And but I think, even if you're not there yet, you still have to process steps. So I think you have to be able to make drafts that that they are going to be shitty, that that they're going to be incomplete, that that they're not going to be exactly the movie. But these are steps that will help you to go to the top of the stairs. And there you start to digest what you've written. You can make, people read and make you feedbacks, and all this keep working. And by making those successive draft, the movie keep changing. And I think at some point, like, that this is the movie that you want to make, like, that this is it. Like, you didn't write that scene because you have to respect this rule, or because somebody is going to expect that you put this, but because it's 100% yourself, and that you are at ease with every scene and every word. And at some point also, I think you need to go and to jump in the water, like that the movie is going to evolve, the script is going to evolve while you're going to be shooting. So you have to be like 80% ready, but I think there's still those 10% that you don't have to wait for. Like you have to launch the train, and the 10% will, be made while the train is already going.
It'll take care of itself once the momentum is achieved.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Coralie, thank you so much. This was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great chatting with you.
Any parting advice for those aspiring filmmakers out there?
Do what you like and really be yourself as a filmmaker.
That's great.
I think the main advice.
On that note, thank you again. Real pleasure.
Yeah, me too. For me too.
All right. So here, as always, are some key takeaways from this conversation with Coralie. Number 1, prep your materials. In addition to the script for Revenge, Coralie wrote a 40-page treatment that described the story, plot, and visuals in stark detail. This really conveyed to producers that she had a real clear vision for this project. She also did a rip-o-matic treatment reel video that showcased tonal references of music, movie clips, and imagery that further defined the movie, all of which gave the producers more confidence in the movie and in her. Number 2, conflicts are inevitable. Sometimes, in the heat of the moment on a grueling set, while you're over time and under budget, you don't always have time to explain things. And much as I hate to say it, according to many directors, sometimes you don't always have the time to be nice. Yes, as a director, you should strive to make every effort to be as respectful and kind to your entire cast and crew as much as possible. And as Chelsea Stardust mentioned on a previous episode, when it comes to filmmaking, it's chaos, be kind. However, throughout the course of making films, sometimes you will have to assertively enter conflicts so you can get what you need. There's a difference between being an asshole and being strategically aggressive. If you're a miserable fuckface on set who yells and screams all day, every day, your crew will check out instantly and underperform, and you'll deserve it. But if you're too nice, you run the risk of being taken advantage of. There's no clear answer here, but this is an eventual scenario that all directors will have to face and figure out on their own. Coralie discussed her own struggles with this, but how inevitably she was on a low-budget set and had to get things done her way. And as a result, had to whoop some ass here and there, but she did so strategically. Eli Roth tells a story about the first day on the set of Hostel. He and a bunch of the crew members bonded over drinks the night before production, and he went back to his hotel room early, but the crew stayed out drinking and showed up on set completely hungover. Thinking Eli was their friend, they felt entitled enough to do this without consequences. They were wrong. As a result, they dragged ass that day on set, and without batting an eye, Eli yelled and screamed at the guilty parties and even fired some of them. As harsh as this may sound, this set a precedent on his sets that this type of behavior will not be tolerated. If it's not your nature to be aggressive or assertive, it's important that you think about the bigger picture. Coralie touched on something so obvious, but I rarely hear it, and that is that you're going to have to live with your film for the rest of your life. Every frame, every detail, every decision will be etched in stone. So those moments on set when you have to fight to get what you need or fight to get something done the right way or a better way are all worthwhile battles because you only get one shot. Film is permanent. Do not let anybody off the hook, especially yourself. Number 3, step into the void. If you're a first-time filmmaker, nothing can prepare you for your first movie. Yes, make shorts, go to film school, read Making Movies by Sidney Lumet, and watch every single special feature making of that you can. But things will inevitably go wrong. There will be things that you don't know how to handle. Crew members may turn on you, effects may break down, and that scene you agonized over might not even end up working. Now, the way that you respond to these things, the way that you handle yourself when you're at the mercy of all the things that go wrong on set, that's directing. Coralie mentioned how her work as an AD led her to realize that directing is problem solving. Because of this, she was able to approach her first film with confidence despite not entirely knowing what she was doing, but She figured it out along the way and made a kick-ass movie regardless. A lot of would-be directors get daunted by the thought of their first movie or spend too much time preparing or over-educating themselves instead of just doing it. Successful first-time filmmaking is a messy process and largely a matter of jumping headfirst into a difficult shoot and flailing your way through to make your days on set and somehow, by the grace of God, making a good movie in spite of it all. As important as preparation and education are, as a filmmaker, you can never be fully prepared for the difficulties your movies will bring you. You'll simply gradually get better with every film that you make. So if you're approaching your first film, embrace feeling stupid, embrace feeling unprepared, embrace imposter syndrome, and embrace the fact that you don't really know what you're doing, because nobody ever really does until they get a few films under their belt. Number 3, build a collective. I was shocked to hear Coralie mention that horror and most genre films were not widely accepted in France, but apparently despite the French extremist horror movement, this is the case. As a result, though, Coralie built a community of other aspiring genre filmmakers who would learn from each other, pool resources, and ultimately become a support system. They would even invite industry professionals like writers, directors, and producers to share their experiences on filmmaking and working with first-time filmmakers. These kind of relationships are priceless, not just from a networking perspective, but from a life perspective. As the saying goes, you become the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. So if you want to be a filmmaker, spend time around other filmmakers. Are you in a small town with not a lot of film people? Turn to social media, hold meetings via Skype, Zoom, or whatever, or start a podcast. You'll need a community, a family to fall back on when the going gets tough, and Coralie attributes her ability to overcome the many difficulties she experienced producing her first movie to this community that she built. So find your tribe or build it from scratch. Anyway, guys, thank you as always for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it'd mean the world to me if you shared it with your friends and family on social media. Don't forget to follow the show on Instagram at I'm Nick Taylor, that's I am Nick Taylor, and on Twitter at the same handle. Thanks again for listening to The Nick Taylor Horror Show.